Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. In today's episode, I am talking about systems. And before we get into it, a little background here. So I was on a walk this morning and they were interviewing Morgan Housel, he does some work in like the finance space. Anyway, that's not really important to the podcast, but he was talking about why he likes to focus on systems over goals. And I looked up a little more to see what his philosophy was. And I wanted to share that before I dove into the episode and what I have to share on the topic. But he says, systems are repeatable, sustainable daily processes that lead to long-term success, while goals are often one-time achievements that lose motivation once met. Systems are daily actions and habits that build the life you want, making success a product of consistent effort rather than wishful thinking. And I think part of it, some of it gets into the semantics of like, okay, is it a system or a goal or rhythm or routine? I don't think that matters as much for the purpose of this podcast, but I did like thinking through of like, okay, how do I apply this in my life? The reason it was also in my mind is a few weeks ago, I was on a Day in Her Life podcast and Ellie, the host, asked me towards the end, she's like, so what systems do you have to make everything run in your life? And my response was like, oh, well, like everything, in my head, I'm thinking everything in my life is a system, but I really couldn't come up with any on the spot. So I think for a while I've been like, okay, so what are the systems? Because I couldn't believe that my response was basically nothing. And then, of course, looking back, I was like, well, Prep Dish is a system that I use. But then over the weeks, I've just been thinking of, oh my goodness, my life really does, like that instant thought that was in my head of like, well, my life runs on systems. It really does. And so I did this and I was listening to the podcast while I was on a walk. So then I kind of started thinking through like, okay, so what are the systems in my life and what goals are they helping me to attain? And it was really interesting to kind of go through this exercise. So I thought I would share, I don't have them like numbered in an order, but I think there's close to like a dozen, maybe 10 different systems that I have in place. And then I was going to go through and, okay, here's the goal that I'm trying to achieve. But it's interesting because I really do look at it more as a system versus like focusing on the goal. It's like, okay, the important thing is doing this thing every day or on a regular basis. And it also touches on, making sure these, I guess systems is the word he uses, but really making sure it's a habit. How do you turn this into a habit so then you can like ultimately reach the goal? So yeah, good to have the goal in mind, but the real magic is in the system. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'll just walk through, yes, I'll touch on meals and Prep Dish and all that, but I'm just going through all these different varieties of systems that I could think of in my life. So they're not in any particular order and not all like food and health related. So the first one, right now, as I've mentioned, I am writing a book. I don't wake up every day and say, oh, I'm writing a book or my goal is to write a book. I wake up every day and my goal is to write. I know that every morning, after breakfast, I have this window of time in which I write. And yes, I've been doing that, probably for 2 years now. But if I wake up and write every day, eventually, yes, I have a book, but I'm focused on the everyday writing. I'm not focused on the end product or the goal, which is the book. The next thing is, I was thinking through of like, what are some different health habits that I have? And I'm not thinking every day like, oh, my goal is to be healthy. It's more, I don't even think about it, right? These are all just like systems that happen every day. Taking my supplements. I know when I wake up, as I'm making breakfast, I'm taking supplements. Even backing up before that, when I first wake up, I'm having some lemon water and some Tulsi tea. That's hydrating for the day. So, I have all of those things that are happening. And again, those are systems. So I don't even have to think about them. The next one with homeschooling, there's a lot of different things that are happening there. And I have those all into systems. I know, and it's not on a time schedule, but it's more this, which we've talked about a lot in the past. I actually think I did at least one episode, if not more, on habit stacking. And so a lot of these systems are the way that I make sure they happen is I stack them on something on top of something we're already doing. So with the homeschooling, in the morning, I'm doing a little bit, staying there and doing some of our work right after breakfast. And then some of the other comes right after lunch. And then the other, then at night we're reading some books. And so it's like they all kind of fit into these times of day and into area, added on to things we're already doing. Then another thing that I was thinking through of like, okay, so maybe If there's a goal to decrease anxiety, what would be the system there? Well, some systems I have in place for that is I wake up every morning and I meditate. I know that I'm going to sit in silence for a few minutes outside first thing in the morning. I also know at night before I go to bed, I like to have a bath, and that helps me to be, more calm and relaxed. And so, yes, maybe I have a goal of less anxiety, but what are the systems that are making that happen? How am I staying calm with, having 4 kids at home right now? And those are some of the habits and systems that I have in place for that. Same thing with movement. It's daily walking, having a little mini trampoline right by my desk that I can jump on before I start any work calls, lifting weights, all of these things are set up as systems. And then I was even, going further out to thinking through my social life. I have a group of fellow entrepreneurs. We have been meeting, 7+ years now. We meet every single month. We have a system. We meet every month and we do a retreat at least once a year. Sometimes we'll do 2, but we always do 1 trip a year. And so it's all set in a system. So that happens all the time. We see each other every month for 7 years. I've barely missed a month in all of those years because, again, it's set up. Even with some of my friends that it's not an entrepreneur group or just, social friends. There's 2 girlfriends. We like to meet up for, coffee or lunch or whatever it is. And we kind of have this rhythm. I think you can kind of use the 2 words interchangeably. But we have this rhythm of meeting up every month. And so we kind of know okay, every month we try and get together, and then we try and do a girls trip too. And so that's kind of like a once a year thing. It's not as structured as a system, but it's still there in the background, making sure that we're meeting up on a regular basis. Another one. So a few years ago did the Bible in a Year podcast. And with that, it was the system of okay, every day I listened to the podcast, and by the end of the year, I'd listen to the entire Bible. But had I just said, oh, this is my goal, well, sure, that's a great goal, but until you have it broken down into a system, it's not going to happen. This year, I've taken that a step further of okay, listening to it was great. So much is lost when I'm just listening. So this year I'm doing physical Bible, but reading the New Testament. So I know when I wake up, part of my morning routine is and it's one that's broken down where you need to do 6 days a week. And I can also double up on them if I miss one. But every morning, for the most part, I wake up and I read that. And at this point, I think I've got 10 weeks left and I'm going to be through the entire New Testament. But I'm not, yes, the goal was to read that, but the reason it's happening is because I have a system in which to place that. I have a place in my life where I know I can do that on a regular basis. And this is true with any book that I want to read. Brooke gave me another book. It's called Finding Adam. It's really interesting. Anyway, I'm reading that as more just a fun book. And I started reading it during our travels a few weeks ago. And then I got home and I wanted to finish it. And I was kind of I didn't have a set time in my day to read it. So I started reading for a few minutes right before bed. And it's I intuitively created, this quote unquote system of okay, if I just do every night a few minutes, then okay, I can get through this. It might take a little while because it's I'm reading 1 chapter a night, but in a month or 2, I can get through this book. So, but again, the goal was to get through the book, but I had to create a system in order to make that happen. And then, last, but certainly not least, when I'm looking at family meals and food and, getting meals on the table. So yes, you want to meal prep and, use prep dish. I would even argue that meal prep is not the goal and prep dish is not the goal. They are the systems that will get you to your goal. So the goal is family connection. The goal is eating healthier so you have more energy and better health, long-term health, prevention of disease, back to the family connection, and improved mental and emotional health by sitting down, having a calmer environment at night. So those are the goals. And then, prep dish is the system. That's what gets you to that goal. And, meal prep or even just sitting down, again, it's even if you sign up for prep dish, there's still a lot of things that have to happen to implement that. And that's what I've spent the past 12, 13 years of my career of okay, well, I can give people these meal plans, but then how do they implement it? What is the system that they use at home to make sure it happens? And for me, there's a few key steps, right? It's okay, I know that on Friday afternoon, I need to look at my next week and see how many meals we need and write out a list of here's the meals we're going to eat. And then one of the key steps, almost like the cornerstone habit, is doing that grocery order, placing in a grocery order, going to the grocery store. And if it's on a set day and time, even better, because then again, you're creating a system. And then if you choose to do meal prep, finding a day and time in your week where you can do it regularly. I've heard of people that, okay, I go for a run on Saturday and I know when I'm done with that run that I do my meal prep. Or if I, get groceries, now if you're getting groceries ordered, just have them ordered, the afternoon before you're going to do your meal prep. So it kind of is this like trigger of like, okay, tonight's my meal prep night. But, finding these little things that can help you embed it into your life and make it a system. So anyway, those are my thoughts on some systems that I do have in my life. So if someone were to ask me again, what are some systems that you have to make your life work better? And as I've been thinking, I was like, okay, pretty much everything that's happening in my life, I think with work, but I mean, so much more so once having a family and kids, it's like everything gets done because it's a system. So anyway, I hope you found this episode interesting. If you are wanting to try Prep Dish, we do have a free trial set up at prepdish.com/MPM. I would love to be your system that helps you to reach your goal of family connection, of more energy, better health, sitting down to tasty, healthy meals. So if you are looking for a system to help you create that goal, then prepdish.com/MPM for 2 weeks free. That is all I have for this week. I will be back again next week with another episode.